You'll thank us one day, Madison. Art isn't a real career. That's what my mom said as I stood frozen in the garage, staring at the empty corner where my easels, brushes, and canvases once lived. The sun slanted through the dust-heavy window, revealing nothing but a forgotten streak of paint on the floor. Everything else gone. I clenched the strap of my backpack. Where is it? My work, my portfolio? My stepdad, Tom, shrugged. Sold it. You weren't using it seriously. And we needed room for the new treadmill. The treadmill. A black, glossy monument to their arrogance. I couldn't speak. My lips parted, but nothing came out. Not even tears. Just silence. You can always paint again later, Mom added, sipping her smoothie. They didn't know. They didn't realize they had just burned the bridge back to my trust. And from that moment I knew I would never forget this. My name is Ava Monroe, and I was 17 when I first learned that talent alone wasn't enough. Not in my house, anyway. I grew up in a small town in Oregon, where everyone knew your parents before they knew your name. My father, Charles Monroe, was a dentist, precise, meticulous, practical. My mother, Diane, was the picture of suburban perfection, PTA member, garden club president, and volunteer piano teacher to kids who didn't care. They had one belief drilled deep into their veins. Art was a hobby, not a profession. Even as a kid, I knew I was different. I didn't like dolls or soccer or doing science projects. I liked colors. I liked mixing them, layering them, dragging them across paper in ways that made people pause. There was this peace I'd feel when the brush met canvas, like the world stopped rushing and just exhaled. I'd stay up late, sketching under my covers with a flashlight or using leftover makeup to paint on old pizza boxes. Anything could become a masterpiece if you looked hard enough. By the time I was 10, my teachers were telling my parents that I needed to be in art school, that I had something they didn't see very often in kids, a gift. But my parents? They'd smile politely and wave it off. She's just imaginative, my mom would say. She'll grow out of it, Dad would add. They didn't see me. Not really. But one person did, Grams. My dad's mother, Eleanor Monroe. She was like a soft patch of grass in a house full of concrete. Grams believed in the magic of creativity. She used to be a photographer in her younger days, back when women weren't allowed much room to dream. You're not crazy for seeing things differently, she'd tell me, handing me vintage watercolors she kept hidden from my dad. You're just ahead of your time. Grams was the only one who encouraged me. On my 13th birthday, she took me to a small gallery in Portland, my first real art experience. I remember the smell of fresh paint, the echo of heels against the wood floor, the hushed awe of people looking at giant canvases with nothing but splashes of color. I whispered, I want this. I want my work here someday. Grams squeezed my hand. Then you'll make it happen, Ava. But at home, things were different. My parents tolerated my passion, but only barely. They set limits. No more than 1 hour of art a day. No painting during school nights. And, eventually, you need to start focusing on real subjects, Ava. They didn't buy me supplies. They didn't ask about my projects. If I wanted to create, I had to scrounge for it. I'd work odd jobs, babysitting, mowing lawns, cleaning garages, just to buy my own brushes or afford a set of acrylics. Still, I pushed on. I joined school art clubs, entered competitions, built a portfolio using scraps and secondhand canvases. I applied to every art scholarship I could find. I worked harder than I'd ever worked for anything. Then senior year happened. I secretly applied to the Rhode Island School of Design, RISD, the best art school in the country. Grams helped me prepare the application. She even paid for the submission fee. And then it came. A thick envelope, embossed with the RISD logo. I couldn't believe it. I'd gotten in. Full ride. Tuition, housing, supplies, everything. I didn't open it in front of my parents. I wanted to wait. I had this fantasy. I'd walk in, hand them the letter. They'd cry, hug me, apologize for not believing in me. It would be this movie-worthy redemption scene. But that's not how it went. I left the envelope on the kitchen counter one night, just for a minute, while I went to the garage to grab a portfolio to show them. When I came back, it was gone. "Where's the envelope?" I asked. Mom looked up from her tea, expression unreadable. "What envelope?" "The one from Artsy," I said. "It was just right here." "Oh, that?" I tossed it. Thought it was more art mail. "You get those all the time." My stomach sank. "You what?" Dad walked in, holding a trash bag. "Ava, don't start. We've talked about this. You're not going to some art commune across the country. You're going to community college like we planned." I stormed to the trash, dug through bags of eggshells, coffee grounds, soggy paper towels. Found the envelope, ripped in half. They hadn't even read it. I stared at my mother. "You threw away my future." She didn't flinch. "No. We're giving you a real one." The next few days were a blur. I cried in the school bathroom. Grams was livid, but she was battling cancer and too weak to intervene. I tried to reason with my parents, but they stonewalled me. Cut off my savings account. Canceled my student card. Took away my car keys. "You'll thank us one day," Mom said with that cold smile. But I didn't thank them. I left. I packed a duffel bag, took the bus to Portland, and moved into Graham's attic. She said, "We'll figure it out, sweetheart." And we did. In the attic, with moldy wood beams and a leaking window, I rebuilt my life. I worked full-time at a diner. Nights, I painted. Grams helped where she could, setting up a corner in her sunroom, buying me canvases from estate sales. I started posting my work online. Instagram, Etsy, TikTok. Slowly, I gained traction. People messaged me, "Your art makes me feel something." I sold my first canvas for $70, my second for $120, then a commission for $500. It felt surreal. I applied to a smaller art institute in Portland. They accepted me. I paid my way through one painting at a time. By 22, I had 40K followers. By 24, I had a manager. Grams lived to see me host my first solo show in a local gallery. She wore a velvet scarf and stood like royalty as people asked for autographs. She whispered, "You made it, baby." And I had, even if it didn't look like the path I imagined. When Grams passed away, I was heartbroken. But I didn't stop. I owed her that much. That year, I did a mural for a coffee chain. It went viral. I got offered licensing deals, collaborations, online classes, gallery spaces. One day, I got a call from an agent. "There's a gallery up for sale. It's small, but famous, the White Finch. You interested?" My breath caught. The White Finch. It was my mother's favorite. She went there every spring with her friends. Took photos, sipped wine, pretended to support the arts. And it was struggling. Without hesitation, I said, yes. I bought it anonymously. I walked through the doors 2 weeks later and felt something click, like the world had turned full circle. And this time, I was the one in control. I stood in front of Gallery Hammond, the most prestigious art space in the city. A place I had once only dreamed of entering as an artist, now welcoming me through its grand doors, not as a guest, but as its owner. 6 months earlier, I had discovered a forgotten email from a woman named Catherine Lynn, an art curator in New York, who had seen one of my digital portfolios I uploaded to an obscure blog years ago. "Your work stopped me mid-scroll," she wrote. "I'm hosting an emerging artists residency. Would you be interested?" That email had been buried under spam because I never saw it, because my parents had disconnected my Wi-Fi when I refused to give up art. I remember the day I discovered it, sitting at the public library trying to submit a freelance assignment using their internet because mine had been cut off. I was shaking when I read it. I emailed back anyway, even though it was dated 3 months ago. Catherine replied the next morning, "I'm glad you found this. I had a feeling you would eventually." That message changed everything. She helped me apply for the residency. I was selected. A full ride. 3 months of studio space, housing, mentorship, and a final show in Manhattan. I didn't tell my parents. They thought I was working retail and getting over the art phase. That's what they called it. A phase. They had no idea I'd left for New York. No idea I'd sold my first 3 paintings within 2 weeks of a show opening. No clue that a collector from Chicago commissioned a series of 5 pieces for his private home gallery. Each canvas went for $4,000. That money was the seed that grew faster than I ever imagined. I started taking business courses online at night, hired a manager, opened an LLC. My art wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. And then came the opportunity. Gallery Hammond's owner, David Bertram, was retiring. Catherine, who had become my mentor, texted me out of nowhere. Guess who's stepping down from Hammond? My breath caught. Want to make a legacy move? I was terrified, but I called my financial advisor. We ran the numbers. I made the offer. David accepted. Apparently, he admired my work. The irony? This gallery was my parents' favorite weekend escape. Every first Saturday, they get dressed up and take selfies at the exhibits, sipping cheap wine and acting like art patrons. They didn't even remember that I used to ask them to bring me along, that I used to beg to be taken seriously.
But now?
They would be entering my gallery, and I had the perfect way to reveal it. 2 weeks after the purchase, I invited them for the grand reopening of Gallery Hammond under new ownership. I knew they wouldn't miss it. They adored their cultural Saturdays. As expected, they arrived dressed to impress. My mother wore her oversized sun hat and Gucci knockoff. Dad had on the same gray blazer he always wore when pretending to be a critic. They didn't notice me at first. I stayed behind the welcome desk, watching them browse the main room. Then I walked out holding a folder. My mom's jaw dropped. Emily. My father narrowed his eyes. What are you doing here? I smiled calmly. You might want to take a look at this before we continue. I handed them the ownership papers, complete with my name and signature. Mom blinked, confused. Dad flipped through the document, his lips parting. You own this place? He stammered. Yes, I said evenly. You're standing in my gallery. They looked around again, like the walls had shifted. I watched my mother's expression morph from disbelief to something like panic. But how? I gave them a smile I had waited years to wear. Remember when you sold all my art supplies because you thought I was wasting my time? Turns out, that time wasn't wasted after all. My voice didn't shake. My hands didn't tremble. I felt no anger, just clarity. Their silence stretched. I added softly, I wanted you to see what you almost destroyed. And then, without waiting for a reply, I turned to greet the other guests. My former art teacher was there. Catherine was too, proudly introducing me to a collector from LA. I didn't need their approval anymore. I had already claimed my space. This gallery, this moment, was mine, and no one could take it away. I stood in front of them, Mom, Dad, Aunt Brenda, and Uncle Doug, all huddled around the TV in our small Midwestern living room. Their faces turned toward me like I was an unwelcome commercial interrupting their regular programming. I bought it, I said simply. They blinked. Bought what? Dad scoffed, half a beer can lifted to his lips. The Miller Gallery, I answered, carefully watching each expression. Aunt Brenda's face dropped, the color draining like wet paint sliding off a canvas. That's not funny, Elsie. I'm not joking. Uncle Doug leaned forward, eyes narrowing like he was reading the fine print on a loan contract. You? That's impossible. You don't have that kind of money. I calmly set a folder on the coffee table and opened it, signed contracts, ownership papers, and a digital tablet with the wire transfer receipt. No noise now except the soft hum of the ceiling fan. You're bluffing, Dad barked, but his voice faltered just slightly. I looked him in the eyes, feeling the exact weight of years I'd spent being told to grow up and focus on something real. I wasn't bluffing, and they all knew it. Let's rewind 24 hours. When I found out that they'd sold off my remaining collection of oil paints, brushes, and canvases to clear out the garage, without telling me, I almost couldn't speak. These weren't random supplies. They were mine. Custom-made, gifted by mentors, gathered over years, and steeped in memory. I told you to move that junk months ago, Dad said as I stared at the empty space where my art cabinet had once stood. Junk, I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. You haven't touched them in years, Mom added. We needed the space. But you didn't even ask. Uncle Doug chuckled from the kitchen. Maybe now you'll finally do something real with your life. The room spun, not physically, but emotionally. I felt disoriented, like I had stepped into someone else's nightmare. It was one thing to never support my dreams, it was another to erase them like they never mattered. They gaslit me when I confronted them, made me feel crazy for caring. You're being dramatic, Aunt Brenda said. You always had that martyr complex, Dad chimed in. But this time, I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice or cry. I just walked out. Because I knew something they didn't. I had already been speaking with the Miller Gallery's current owner for weeks, ever since he saw my viral online exhibit and reached out. He was retiring. No one in his family wanted the gallery. He had seen my work. He liked my vision. And he liked my offer. That same afternoon, I signed the paperwork. Back in the present, the room was still quiet. You bought it, why? Mom finally asked. To build something of my own, I said. A space for artists like me. The ones who are laughed at in living rooms just like this one. Brenda's jaw tensed. That's our gallery. We've hosted there every year for the Veterans Fundraiser. I know, I said. And if you want to continue using it, we'll have to negotiate. You're not serious. I am. Completely. Uncle Doug stood up. That's low, Elsie. Using our favorite place against us. Funny, I said, folding the folder closed again. I said the same thing when you sold my life's work for pocket change. My voice wasn't angry, it was calm. Cold even. And that unnerved them more than yelling ever could. I'm not trying to punish you, I continued. But I'm done letting you walk all over me. Brenda tried a different tactic. We were trying to help you move on. You've been stuck. You live in your head. I live in my art, I replied. You never try to understand it. Dad crossed his arms. This is just another phase. Dad, I've sold more in 1 month than you made in a year at your repair shop. The moment the words left my mouth, I regretted the tone. But not the truth. Because it was true. I had been making silent money moves while they were busy dismissing me. I didn't mean to be cruel, I added. But I need you to understand. I'm not the teenager who used to beg you to come to my exhibits. They looked like they didn't recognize me. And maybe they didn't. Maybe they never had. The room shifted again when my cousin Rachel walked in. She had just returned from college for the weekend. Wait, you're the new owner of Miller? She asked, eyes wide. I nodded. I saw the article this morning.
She grinned.
Everyone on campus is talking about the rebrand. I didn't know that was you. Suddenly, someone in the family was proud. Rachel sat next to me and flipped through the proposal document. You're going to start an artist-in-residence program?
Yeah.
I already have 2 artists lined up. One from Chicago, one from Atlanta. Rachel looked at her mom. This is amazing. Why are you guys acting weird? Silence. Rachel looked between us. Wait, is this about the garage thing? It wasn't just a garage thing, Rachel, I said gently. They sold all of it. Without telling me. They treated my work like trash. Rachel frowned. Mom, seriously? Brenda rolled her eyes. It was a misunderstanding, but the power had shifted. And now someone else in the family saw it too. That night, Dad came into my childhood room, now just a guest room, while I was packing. I still think you're being harsh, he said. And I think you still can't say you're sorry. He sat down on the edge of the bed, looking exhausted. It's hard to accept your kid is better than you. I froze. I thought I was protecting you from disappointment, he continued. But maybe I was just jealous. Watching you chase something I never had the guts to go after. For the first time in years, I saw the man behind the father. Tired. Human.
Flawed.
I'm not trying to be better than you, Dad. I just wanted you to believe I could be something more. He nodded slowly. Well, I guess I see it now. The next week, I hosted a soft launch event at the gallery. I invited local artists, mentors, and even some of the family. To my surprise, Brenda and Doug came, awkward, stiff, but present. They didn't say much. but they stood in the back and clapped at the end of my speech. Rachel brought her friends. They asked for selfies with me, called me an art world disruptor. Mom didn't show, but later that night, she sent a one-line text. Your father told me everything. I hope it was worth it.
I stared at it for a long time.
And then I typed back. Every stroke of the brush was. I never thought that revenge could feel this quiet. No fireworks. No dramatic speeches. Just the soft click of keys as I typed up the final paperwork to transfer ownership of the Wentworth Gallery to my name. The same gallery my parents used to drag me to on weekends, praising every painting but mine. The same gallery they called real art. I stared at the document.
Signed. Sealed.
Delivered. And now mine. I looked around my studio, my real studio now, not the corner of the garage they used to let me use. Sunlight spilled in through tall windows. My own paintings lined the walls, unapologetically bold, rich in color, defiant in their strokes. Some still bore the scrapes and scars from being packed and repacked in secrecy. This was the life they tried to erase. And here I was, restoring it. I hadn't spoken to them since the reveal, since they found out the anonymous buyer of their favorite gallery was me. I still remember the look on Mom's face, her jaw tightening, eyes scanning for anyone to blame but herself. Dad tried to laugh it off. You always were dramatic, he said. What are you gonna do, paint in the lobby? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Instead, I hired 2 local art teachers, ones they had mocked before, to curate the first exhibition. The theme? Resilience in color. Every artist featured had been told they weren't good enough. Every piece had once been dismissed as unworthy. And the gallery was packed. Critics called it a renaissance of raw expression. My paintings, particularly the one I'd titled Daughter, without permission, sold within hours. The one person missing? My mother. 3 weeks later, I got the call. Hello. I answered, already knowing the number. Lana, it's Mom.
Her voice was thin.
Not fragile, but thin, like it had to squeeze through years of pride just to reach me. There was a long pause before she continued. I saw the papers. You bought Wentworth. Yes. You really went through with it? I didn't know what to say. Part of me still wanted her to apologize. Another part of me had stopped expecting it a long time ago. I'm proud of you, she added quickly. You've done well. The silence stretched. I didn't feel it. Then came the next part. The real reason for the call. I was wondering, she hesitated, if you could help. Your father and I, well, the business isn't doing so well. And we might have to sell the house. I closed my eyes. So there it was. Not I'm sorry I burned your dreams. Not I regret taking your future from you. Just, can you pay our bills now? I could have said no. God, I wanted to. But the thing is, growth isn't revenge. And revenge isn't growth. So I gave her conditions. Clear ones. I'll help pay the mortgage for 3 months. After that, you're on your own. I'm not your retirement plan. And one more thing, I added before she could speak again. You don't get to speak about my art like it's a phase anymore. You don't have to love it. But you will respect it. There was a long pause on the line. Then, to my shock, I heard her voice crack. Fair, she whispered. That's fair. Helping them didn't make me feel small. It made me feel in control. The irony wasn't lost on me, how the very passion they discarded was now what kept their lights on. But I didn't help them because they deserved it. I helped them because I deserved to know that I could rise above them, that I didn't have to become bitter to be victorious. A month later, during the second gallery opening, this time themed unmuted, I caught sight of her. My mother. She stood in the back corner, her hands clasped tightly, her mouth drawn. She didn't say anything to me directly, but I saw her lingering near Daughter without permission. I watched her face shift, recognition, discomfort, then something softer, maybe even regret. I didn't approach her. I didn't need to. She was witnessing what she once destroyed, reborn and unstoppable. I also noticed someone else that night. Marisol, my childhood friend who had once cried when her sketchbook was torn by my parents. She stood confidently beside her own piece now, talking to a group of buyers. Her eyes found mine and she mouthed, "Thank you." This was bigger than me now. It was about reclaiming space for all of us. 6 months later, I stood in front of the polished glass doors of the Arden Gallery. Only now, the letters on the sign above were different. They spelled Raya West Studio. The smell of paint, wood shavings, and coffee wafted into the morning air as the gallery prepared to open for its grand relaunch. Workers buzzed around, finalizing the installations and straightening the spotlight angles on the wall-mounted frames. Each one displayed artwork from young, unknown artists, some homeless, some estranged from families, others like me, artists once told they were wasting their time. I took a sip of my coffee and looked down at my phone. My inbox was filled with press requests, local coverage, and even a message from Arts Now magazine wanting to feature me in their 25 Under 25 Innovators issue. But that wasn't the highlight of my morning. The highlight came as I stepped inside and saw Mrs. Donnelly, my middle school art teacher, standing near the welcome desk. Her hands were clasped together, her eyes glistening. "You've done it, Raya," she whispered. I hugged her tightly, the kind of hug that erases old wounds. "You were the first person who ever told me my work mattered," I said. Behind her, a framed photo of my first piece, Muted Dream, hung proudly in the main exhibit space. It was the only piece I'd insisted not be for sale. It was the last painting I completed before Mom sold off my art supplies. The only one created with broken brushes, dried-out markers, and watercolor sheets I had to dig out of a garbage bag. Just across the room, my mother stood awkwardly in the corner. She looked out of place. Her designer scarf sat too tightly around her neck, and her eyes darted around like she was looking for an escape. But none came. She had RSVP'd to this event because she thought it would reflect well on her. A former, struggling single mom, standing next to her now successful daughter. She didn't know what the exhibit theme was. She didn't know I had dedicated a whole wall to art that wasn't meant to survive. On that wall were burnt sketches, partially completed canvases, and photos of the desk she'd sold to buy herself that faux leather tote she never even used. I'd written one line on the plaque next to the pieces. "Every piece you see here was once deemed trash, until it wasn't." My mom read it twice. She turned to look at me, her eyes hollow, with something I couldn't quite name. Shame? Grief? Realization? It didn't matter. I smiled gently and walked up to her. "Thanks for coming," I said. She blinked, hesitating. This is all so impressive." "I know." She tilted her head. "How did you afford all this?" There it was, the curiosity that wasn't rooted in pride, but in disbelief. As if she still couldn't connect the dots between the girl she had discarded and the woman standing before her. I could have told her about the NFT sale that earned me $120,000, or the grant from the Women in Arts Foundation, or the commissions from wealthy collectors who flew me to exhibit in San Diego. But I didn't. I simply said, "Art paid for it." Then I walked away. Not out of spite, but out of peace. Later that day, I sat with Deshaun, my gallery co-director and longtime friend. He handed me a stack of applications from young artists hoping to be featured next quarter. "Think we'll find the next Raya West in here?" he asked with a playful grin. "I hope we find someone better." He chuckled. "I like that." I did too. My phone buzzed again, this time a text from a girl I met during a recent shelter workshop. "Ms. West, I sold my first painting today. I cried all night, but I'm okay now. Thank you for showing me that I could still be an artist, even when no one believed me." I stared at that message longer than any magazine feature or contract offer. That message was the real win. That was the legacy I wanted to build. A week later, I took a quiet trip to the old storage unit I'd kept for years. Inside were remnants of the girl I used to be, my art journals, crumpled rejection letters, a box of torn canvas scraps I couldn't throw away. I sat cross-legged on the cold floor, opened one of the old sketchbooks, and found a message scribbled on the last page. "Someday, they'll wish they never threw this away." It made me laugh. I'd forgotten how much fight I had in me, even when I had nothing. And now I had everything that mattered. Not wealth,
Not fame, but peace. Control over my life.
and the power to make space for others who needed the same. That evening, as I walked back through the newly painted halls of my gallery, I passed by a group of children attending an after-school art program we'd just launched. Their laughter echoed, colors flew, and the scent of fresh paint reminded me of beginnings. One little girl ran up to me, paint smudged across her cheeks. "Miss Raya, I'm gonna be famous like you one day." I knelt to her level, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "You're gonna be even better than me." She grinned and skipped back to her easel, where she was painting a giant heart with wings. I looked around and realized this was what healing looked like. Not revenge, not even justice, but building a space where broken dreams could fly again. As the sun dipped behind the horizon, I stood in the gallery courtyard under strings of golden lights. My heart was calm. The air was soft. The future felt open. Above me, a banner read, "Raya West Studio, where lost art finds its way back." And somewhere deep inside, I could hear the echo of my younger self whispering, "You did it.